Before I begin, I would first like to pay a personal tribute to the 4 other members of the Meelick Ambush Commemoration Committee: Cathal Crowe, who we just heard, Thomas Toomey, Tom Gleeson and Johnny White. Over the last year, they have put in an immeasurable effort to ensure that the sacrifices of men like Gleeson and McCarthy and those of the East Clare Brigade and Cumann in this area were not forgotten. They are 4 of nature's gentlemen, and anyone will be hard-pressed to find 4 more diligent workers or 4 more honest patriots. So I would ask you please to show your appreciation for them. It has often been said that where Clare leads, Ireland follows. It is not surprising that Clare is known as Ireland's banner county, and in every advance, Clare has been the standard that has led the nation's march. Following the failure of the first Republican rebellion in 1798, the United Irishmen of County Clare were determined that the flame of Irish freedom would not be extinguished. In the following year, in 1799, against uncountable odds, they again rose up in rebellion. But tyrant might conquered right. The rebellion was put down and 3 Republicans were hung for their part in the little-known United Irishmen uprising of Clare in 1799. When the Young Irelanders again asserted the people of Ireland's unfettered right to freedom in 1848, they were led by William Smith O'Brien from Dromoland in Clare. When the Fenians rose in revolt in 1867, the men of Clare were again to the fore and raised their standard. And during the 1916 Rising, Clare men like Peadar Clancy were again involved, and others like Clon Colbert, who had strong family and local connections to Clare, were at the front. During the War of Independence, Clare Republicans were in the vanguard of freedom's battles. Today we have come here to remember 2 of those, Captain Michael Gleeson and Captain Christopher McCarthy, who, at a time when the Irish people were denied democracy, were denied independence, were denied freedom of speech, and were denied freedom of assembly, were willing to risk their lives to ensure that the Irish people were granted those freedoms. On Wednesday, the 15th of June, 1921, 9 members of the 2nd Battalion of the East Clare Brigade, IRA, met in the fields just to the west of us here. Their mission was to raid the Limerick to Ennis mail train to capture British communications and enemy intelligence. Unknown to the IRA members present, there were 30 British soldiers on board that train. The British soldiers survived the IRA volunteers present and opened fire on them with 2 machine guns. Christopher McCarthy was wounded by the opening volley of machine gun fire and fell to the ground, seriously wounded. His comrade, Captain Michael Gleeson, having already reached a place of relative safety, noticed that McCarthy was missing. Although Gleeson must have realised that there was little chance of saving McCarthy, he refused to abandon him. In an act of undeniable heroism, Gleeson raced to McCarthy's aid under a hail of British rifle and machine gun fire. He helped McCarthy to his feet, and in a desperate attempt to escape, he held McCarthy up with one arm while all the time firing back with his revolver at the advancing British soldiers. However, they had only covered a few paces when they were again fired on, and Gleeson fell to the ground, mortally wounded. Gleeson was unable to continue, but McCarthy staggered on. Within a few seconds, the advancing British soldiers surrounded Gleeson and shot him dead where he lay. A short time later, McCarthy was also captured, and he was shot and bayoneted and killed. Michael Gleeson and Christopher McCarthy died for the thing that makes life worth living: freedom. Freedom is not free. It comes at a great cost, and a terrible price was paid for the freedoms that we enjoy today. It was paid by the men executed in the Stonebreakers Yard in Kilmainham in 1916. It was paid by Terence McSweeney in Brixton Prison. It was paid by the men of the West Cork Flying Column at Kilmichael's Wild Heather Glen, and it was paid here at Woodcock Hill, where Gleeson and McCarthy were slain. Men and women who have the courage and spirit of Gleeson and McCarthy cannot be defeated. Tyrants can beat them, they can jail them, they can even line them up against a prison wall and shoot them. But not all the armies of all the empires of all the world can break the spirit of true men and women like Gleeson and McCarthy who yearn to be free. It does not matter whether they seek that freedom in Ireland, in Bahrain, Libya, or anywhere else in the world. Today it is often asked what the men of 1916 and those who followed their example died for. They struggled, they fought and died for the Ireland outlined in the 1916 proclamation. An independent republic whose citizens were all equal and where the petty differences of the past were buried. Where all Irish men and Irish women stood united in a common cause. Unfortunately, that is not the Ireland in which we live today. With the difficulties that Ireland is mired in at present and the seemingly impossible challenges we face, it can be hard at times to take pride in being Irish. However, in every county, in every city, in every town and village in Ireland, there are monuments to Gleeson and McCarthy's generation. And I say when we pass those monuments, we should always hold our heads high and never be ashamed of being Irish. And I hope that everyone passing this monument, every mother on her way out to work in the morning, every man returning in the evening, every child on their way to school, and every immigrant from this parish who returns will be proud. Will hold their heads high and remember that not only do they come from a parish that still has the strong sense of community spirit we can see here today, but that they come from an area where the flame of patriotism and the spirit of freedom still burns in the hearts of the people, and where the names of Gleeson and McCarthy will never be forgotten. We should always remember that if we follow the example set by men like Gleeson and McCarthy, if we emulate their aims, if we follow their principles and stride confidently towards their goals, then no one can set a boundary march upon our nation, and there is nothing that we as a united people could not do. To finish, I would like to quote from General Michael Brennan, commanding officer of the East Clare Brigade, who unveiled in 1948 the monument down at the Republican plot in Meelick. Brennan on that occasion said, and I quote, "A myth has grown up that we of that period were some class of supermen who succeeded in making the British administration in this country impossible. But the volunteers were only part of our army. The main body was made up of the men, the women, and even the children. They fed and clothed the flying columns. They watched over them and passed on every item of information. All over Clare, the homes of the people bore testimony to the heroism and loyalty which could not be quenched. It was the first time in the history of a fight that the people as a whole took part. People in the past fought for their religion or for their clan. But back then, for the first time in history, they fought for their country and they won." Thank you.